Welcome to another OneSoccer Hangouts. I'm Asa Rehman, and we were supposed to have Julian Boucher on with us, but stepping in to fill in is our producer. We've often referred to him as producer Kyle Hall. Now you know who he is. He's on our Zoom chat, making his OneSoccer YouTube stream debut. Thank you so much for coming on with us today, Kyle Hall, joining our good friends, Kurt Larson and Oliver Platt. You know them. Kyle, welcome.
Oh, well, thank you, Asa. It's an absolute pleasure. For all of those tuning in, hoping to see Julian Boucher, I can just say you're welcome. I'm sure this will be much better than that.
Yeah, well, Boucher Boucher versus Hart race is heating up. Hart brushes off 3 times. Boucher battles back, gets 2 this week, so it's 3-2 now in favor of Hart. We'll see who wins that race. That's that's the most sports we're getting right now. It's exciting for me.
It's okay to smile. It's okay to smile.
I think it's just a credit to the incredible resources of OneSoccer that if you have one celebrity bail, you can just pull in another one so quickly. So kudos to OneSoccer.
For those who don't know, Kyle is also the one behind the scenes telling me I need to look like I'm having more fun and
smile more.
This guy right now doesn't look like he's having much fun right now. So I'm going to give it to you all show, buddy.
Oh, fantastic! This is going to be great.
This is going to be the rest of the show.
And frame yourself up a little better too, by the way.
My framing looks quite good in my camera.
It's a beautiful view.
Yeah, this is my Manhattan apartment. You guys like it? You guys know that I share a 1-bedroom apartment with my lovely significant other, who's on Zoom calls about 6 hours every day. So I've been relegated to the bedroom, is where I do my work. And so green screen background.
I love how we have the producer join us for the first time in the first 5 minutes of the show, just a roast of the producer.
This is great. What else you want to call me out for, guys?
Extremely
spelling errors in my
unproduced.
rundowns. Got Adam Jenkins calling me out for spelling errors. What else we got? Let's unburden ourselves.
I was going to bring that up. I want to know how everyone's doing in quarantine right now, what level of quarantine you're at. Because I woke up this morning, I saw my wife, 2 kids on the computer looking up puppies and dogs to adopt. So that's the level of quarantine we're at right now. We've never had a pet, so I don't know if that's
well, after those 2 cats in New York apparently got the coronavirus, I'd steer clear of animals right now, Asa. So
yeah. I know I'm not trying to get any anytime soon, but that's
Asa, this is a lie. You're gonna love this. You're gonna love this.
Let's hear it.
We went to our concierge yesterday to pick up the book that we ordered, which was on how to raise a puppy. As we are having the exact same conversations.
Excellent.
I've been holding out on the no dog front for about 3 years now, and my will has been broken. So my last conceit was, if we're actually going to do this, then I want to know how to raise a dog, because I've never owned a dog. And so I said, if you buy a book and read it on raising a dog, I'll concede. And here we are.
It's not hard.
Adopt one. They come as adults then, and mostly trained usually. Yeah, kind of.
That's what I learned this morning as well.
Yeah.
What's the advice? You're the only one here with a pet.
I would recommend adoption. Like I said, you don't get the puppy years, but they do come usually kind of house trained and things like that. So you skip that part. I am fully for adding pets to more pets to the OneSoccer Hangouts.
Yeah, it's a hard sell on Sarah, who sees puppy and cuteness, and that's basically what she wants.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, the research today from the kids was just looking at pictures. Like, there's nothing else, and then discussing what they're going to do, who's going to take it for the walk, and who's going to play with it. That was it. No picking up poop or anything like that. So, yeah, I think we're still a ways away. All right, the reason why we have Kyle Hall on with us today is to discuss the technical production side, because we learned from an ESPN article this week that La Liga and Media Pro are discussing innovative ways to bring the game back on the broadcasting side when play does return, to make up for the negative impact felt by fans not being in stands, because these games will presumably be played behind closed doors. So this should improve the entertainment value of the games by having multiple camera angles, mics on sidelines, things like that. So on the broadcasting side, adding some new elements. So I asked Kurtz then, what would you like to see in these broadcasts?
What would I like to see? Well, I think broadcasts are okay as they are right now. I think when I'm looking at questions like this and how we can improve things for the fan at home, given that there aren't going to be fans in the stands, most likely, it's what's real and authentic, first of all. I don't like gimmicks. So I remember Major League Soccer a few years ago mic'd up one of the goalkeepers during an all-star game, and it was supposed to be really revolutionary and really interesting. And for me, too gimmicky. You could tell the goalkeeper didn't want to be a part of it. Stuff like that, for me, doesn't work. So anything that I feel is not real, not authentic, not really, not real in any way, I'd want to avoid. So what does that mean? I think maybe you go to the referees and how can they be more involved? How can they be more upfront with the decisions they're making? Maybe during VAR, instead of just coming over, making a box sign and pointing somewhere, maybe they have to give an explanation to a camera next to the VAR machine to let people know how they came to a decision. So speaking just briefly, and I think that's what I would go with.
But before I kind of get into the stuff I'd like to see, do we want to hear more from referees? Is my question.
So, absolutely, because for me, I ask myself this question. I go, what do you, when you leave a game or when you are when a game ends, what are the main talking points? What are the things you are wondering about? And for me, it's usually, why was a decision made in soccer? That's how often is that usually what we are talking about after a game? So why wouldn't we want to learn more about that instance?
Sorry, Carl, I think. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Kurt, generally after viewing any sporting match, my main takeaway is I wish I heard more from the officials. I love having you taken this opportunity to further your argument for more VAR. So sorry to cut you off there, Ollie. Back to you.
Well, no, I just think there's an opportunity maybe for broadcasters to have an expert on hands that they can go to explain a particular decision or something like that. But for me, like a referee, I think referees have had their best games when we don't notice them at all. I don't particularly want to hear the referee explain things. I don't want to spend more time than we already do on VAR, which I already think has had a negative effect. But for me, I'd prefer to see more access. And as Kurt said, it would have to be done in a way that's authentic, but I'd prefer to see more access to coaches, to locker rooms, even to players during the game. And if there's a way we can do that.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be the theme of our discussion today on the Hangout. So if you have any questions on the YouTube channel, feel free to fire them away. Just let us know. We'll get those questions out as they become available to us. And this brings us to our next topic as well. You mentioned the referees in particular. That's one thing that has improved the game broadcasts in certain sports when you have the referee in the booth to break down some of the calls. What's something that you'd like to borrow from some of the other leagues that's had, some of the other sports that's had success and bring to soccer? Ollie, let's go to you first.
Yeah, I think, again, I'd go back to what I was saying before. I think football has been quite closed off in terms of allowing TV crews and so on to have access behind the scenes. I look at for me, the main challenge, if we don't have fans in the stadiums, is to kind of create that fan experience in a different way for people at home. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of social media integration involved in that. And so I see things like potentially allowing fans to see the pre-match team talk. Now, maybe there'd have to be a bit of production done there. Maybe it couldn't be live for obvious language-related reasons, but I would like to see more exposure to those kind of different aspects of the game, and maybe, as a kind of social companion, a kind of walkthrough of everything from the players arriving at the stadium to taking to the field and that kind of behind-the-scenes process.
And Kyle, you have some experience experimenting with certain ideas with some NBA broadcasts. What's some of the things that you've tried that you think could work with soccer?
Yeah, so before we get into some of my experiments working at the NBA Summer League with our experimental optimal broadcast, I'd just like to go back to a point I was hoping to make in the previous conversation. Is this ESPN article? It basically referenced two different ideas that Media Pro would like to impose with the Liga. One of them was new camera angles, right? There are no fans in the stands. I think it's going to look bad on TV to not have fans. So they want to come up with some different angles that doesn't make it look like an empty stadium, but also to utilize some of the space that, I know that broadcasters in sports around the world would love to put different cameras in where fans are, but the home teams are unwilling to give up those seats because those are season ticket holders. They generate a lot of revenue. So I'll be interested to see where they deploy their cameras. But the much bigger thing from that article was they talked about miking up players and coaches for the live broadcasts. And I'm highly skeptical, as we've attempted to do this in the NBA at numerous times, and you just can't put what coaches say during a game live on the air. I mean, anyone who's worked with me in the control room during live games know that I'm fascinated by coaches. I think they're hilarious. I think they're the most expressive when it comes to frustration and anger, and I find it hilarious to watch them. And if you're telling me that you're going to mic up a coach and an official so that we could hear the conversation they had over a disputed call, I think that would be absolutely hilarious. But I can pretty much guarantee that the teams won't sign off on it. They know what coaches say on the sidelines, and we're never going to get to hear that on a broadcast because it's profanity-laced tirades towards players and officials.
So how can we do something that's more practical, right? So like Oliver's idea, I don't think would work. I mean, no coach is going to let a pregame talk go out kind of live on the air just for the other team to take a listen to and hear what's going on inside the other dressing room. What I was going to suggest is, maybe the teams go out to warm up, then, players and coaches know that when they come back into the dressing room, that's when cameras are on. So those final 10 minutes before they go out on the field, you get a little bit of a live look inside the dressing room. It's not much. It doesn't give you that much insight, but it gives you another view of what's going on while you're, while otherwise you'd be watching either the booth or an empty field, right? What I would say is I think a live cam in the locker rooms post-game could be interesting, because why would a coach need to hold back, right? Of course, a coach would know what's going on in there. There would be some profanity, obviously, but I think post-game, Oliver's idea could work. I don't think it could pre-game, though.
Well, my question would be, does it need to be live? Is there a way where we can have cameras in there and record, and then, take bits that are usable, or maybe slightly tweak things to make them usable in a way that, is fairly quick for that broadcast, but isn't quite live?
Yeah, I think we are. I think we are doing that in North America. We are doing. We're not doing that in Europe, though, right? That's the thing.
I think the idea here is to enhance the live experience, right? So you're taking the fans out of the stadiums, the arenas, and still trying to give them some value for these live matches. One thing that's worked with baseball are the multiple camera angles and being able to actually view the different camera angles and pick and choose what you want to watch when. So you could go up from the first baseline and watch the pitch from that angle if you wanted. So I think something like that could work maybe in soccer. To see formations and things like that develop possibly.
I don't love it. I've been on League Pass, and they give you the alternate broadcast, and you can pick which camera angle. You end up picking the game camera. That's the reason,
right?
The main follow. That's why they show that most of the time. And with the mic'd up stuff, I mean, I have experience when they mic up players, or they go and they mic up coaches for their pre and post game conversations. For the pregame stuff, the NBA, when they do NBA games, they literally have a representative in the broadcast truck who sits back in the video department, and he says what you can't use and what you can use. So they bring this recording back to the truck, and he's like, oh, that 7 seconds is okay, that 8 seconds is okay, and the rest of it makes the coach look bad, so we can't play it, we can't use it. So, I mean, the league has editorial control over the mic'd up stuff from players and coaches. It's not even the teams or the broadcasters, it's the league.
Remember a few years ago, was this at I think it was in the 2016 Euro. Maybe Oliver, maybe you can help me out with that. But there was a referee accused of it was a 2014 World Cup, and the referee was accused of asking Ronaldo for his kit before the game. And they actually had to go and I think it was 2014 World Cup. But they actually had to go and listen to what the referees were saying to each other before the game, because they thought that the referee allegedly asking Ronaldo for his kit would be caught on the microphones from the referees talking to each other. I do think it'd be interesting to hear maybe the conversations the referees have during games. Like maybe you could switch between what are the referees saying to each other, what's the booth saying to each other. If we could somehow figure out what the benches were saying, maybe there was a benches mic's commentary as well. Yeah. So I don't know what it is about referees in me, but I want to know more about what's going on inside their heads.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear those discussions. I'd love to hear those discussions, especially when the ref goes over to the assistant and discusses what they might have seen in a handball in a box.
Well, they're also talking to
your
players. I
own.
mean, they're talking to players the entire game, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, they're hearing from players, they're talking to players, they're letting them know what they saw. There actually is some interesting dialogue that goes on that I don't think a lot of your average fan understands how much talking a referee does during the game to make sure things are seen out in the proper way.
Yeah, that stuff is potentially more interesting for me. Like longer explanations of decisions aren't doing.
I knew I'd talk you into it. It's not,
So they do that. They, you'll see leagues, they have their kind of retired official or whoever they bring on to explain a call. But he's like a fraternity of the officials. He'll never say anything that like makes the officials look bad. They won't do it. It doesn't work.
They get called
They
out.
don't.
They'll say that they missed that completely.
Then they defend it. They give it a reason why. Oh, this the angle they were standing at, and you can understand the way the player was facing. They won't call them out.
Yeah, but so but for me, it's not necessarily about always calling out the officials, right? The reason I want to hear from them is because I think a lot of times we can be more sympathetic to what a referee is going through on the field and how they're forced to see the game in a different way. I was actually trying to lobby the CPL before the start of this season to include the referees in post-game press conferences just so they could come up and become more human to us so we would know how difficult their jobs are. And they'd have the opportunity, if they made a mistake, to hold their hands up and say they made a mistake, just like any player would. Obviously, I think that was shot down at the federation level. But I do think there's a reason, and it's to humanize referees a little bit more and just learn about what they go through.
Yeah, going back to the cameras in particular, Ollie, would you see value in an ISO cam on a specific player to see the routes, what they may see?
They used to do this in England on Sky Sports through the 90s. They had something called the player cam, and back then you press the red button on your remote and you could choose to switch to the player cam. And then they got rid of it, which was kind of surprising because if anything, as time has gone on in the Premier League, the stars have just got even bigger, right? And people almost support players more than they do teams sometimes when you look at the fan bases around Cristiano Ronaldo and players like that. So I don't know if I would personally watch it. I think it's something that could be interesting. Again, when I look at kind of social companions to watching the main broadcast. So, for example, I know the Bundesliga have tested creating camera angles that work on vertical screens, so you can watch them on a smartphone and maybe manipulate them a little bit. And that as kind of a side screen to your main broadcast is interesting to me. Don't think I'd want to watch a single player as kind of instead of the main game though.
Have you ever seen Ronaldo off the ball?
It doesn't do much, eh?
I've had the pleasure of watching Cristiano Ronaldo at least a half dozen times at World Cups and European Championships, and I do my own little ISO cam on him where I just focused on him for about 10 minutes, and there's a lot of complaining and walking around, a lot of complaining. It's okay because then he scores the game winner in the Euro semifinal against Wales, right? So he can do that, right?
There's been some analysis that Messi actually creates more space by walking around than other players do at full speed. So yeah, they can get away with it.
I think an ISO cam for me, I mean, I want to see two players battling, right? I don't want to see just someone walking around. I want to see every time these two players came together or this center back went up against this number 9, this is the kind of battle they went through.
So I'm gonna pitch a show for OneSoccer right now. We used to do this back at Goal TV, my early days when I was more of an editor than a producer. And we used to re-air Game in an Hour. You might recall TFC Game in an Hour airing on Goal TV. But we used to do an auxiliary. Oh, they're boring. Hours too long. Anyway, what we used to do is we'd have an additional camera there that would just ISO different players. So it might ISO Sebastian Giovinco for 15 minutes and then Victor Vasquez for 50 minutes. It was kind of before these players' time, but then we'd package together in a picture-in-picture. So you'd have the main follow, the game, but then on your bottom right-hand corner, you could watch Sebastian Giovinco do exactly what you talked about, which was like walk up and down away from the action. It didn't really work. It was a neat idea, but I don't think the ISO cam really works.
I'd rather ISO a coach.
That's what I'm talking about.
I'd rather ISO a coach. Just someone who gets fired up. Just somebody who's just on the fourth official, on his players.
For our CPL fans out there, just imagine an ISO cam on Rob Gale for the entire game.
We've seen it. Valor's put it out before, so
it's fantastic.
It's brilliant.
To plug some OneSoccer programming coming up, our documentary features a lot of kind of sideline shots, and you get a bit of a up close look at the coaches and how they operate, and it's entertaining stuff for sure.
Oh yeah.
All right, we have a question from the YouTube channel. Matthew Mahoney's asking, how does innovation undertaken from XFL change things? Is there anything useful for soccer? I'll ask that to Kurt, he's a football fan. Is there anything you've seen from XFL that soccer can maybe adopt?
Well, I didn't watch the XFL this time around, and the previous version of the XFL, I believe, had like plot lines in it where players were dating cheerleaders. So I'm pretty sure we can't take that.
Why not?
Well, it goes back to what I said off the top of the show, right? Where I have to believe that what I'm watching is real, entertaining, authentic, and this whole idea of interviewing players on the sidelines and stuff. I mean, it's just not engaging, right? Like, I don't need it. I feel like it's just being added for the sake of adding stuff. So anything that is added, I want it to feel like it's there for a reason, and that it actually improves the quality of the broadcast instead of just adding on layers that, in my opinion, don't add anything.
Well, I do believe XFL brought us the wire cam. I believe they're the ones that tried that out. NFL picked it up, and other leagues.
What happened anyway?
They were the first league to use the Sky Cam for every game broadcast. That was there. It had already existed. It had been used a little bit, but they were the first ones like, we're going to put this in for every game broadcast. So
I mean, let's be honest, the thing the XFL brought into it was us asking ourselves if there's ways to actually improve the game in terms of the rules, right? I mean, the 2-point plays, the 3-point plays, and whatever it was, and different ways to score. And does that actually improve the broadcast, because the game is actually more interesting? That's what the XFL brought, in my opinion.
Yeah. Don't anticipate any of the major soccer leagues changing any rules when things return. But
I think, sorry, so just to add, I'm not talking about going full WWE here, but I think there is more room for entertainment and humor in sports broadcasting. I think maybe broadcasters look too much for kind of knowledge and insight, and they undervalue people who are genuinely charismatic and people like to watch. And for me, when you look at the best kind of color commentators, the one I always mention is Tony Romo, who is incredibly insightful and can literally predict things as they're happening, but he's also just bursting with enthusiasm for what he's watching, right? And he's super charismatic and entertaining to listen to. So I'd like to see more of that in sports for sure.
Yeah, just to follow up there, Ollie, I think we can talk about all the different technological advancements you could use to augment a broadcast, but I feel that the ceiling and the floor of a broadcast is almost always determined by the commentators. If you have a great commentator duo, they elevate the game. And if you have a terrible one, I can't tell you how many basketball games I've watched on mute because I can't stand the terrible commentary. But, I have this fantasy where we bring back the Dennis Miller type comedian to broadcast, but instead we go full hog, play-by-play and color commentators, 2 comedians. You don't do it for any of the primetime games. You do it for Columbus versus Dallas on a Tuesday night, both teams out of the playoffs. And they just go on there and they just have fun. They make fun of the players. They make fun of the coaches. They're self-deprecating. They add something to what would otherwise be a meaningless game. That's a dream of mine.
I think you can broadcast games in different ways, right? So, and have success in doing it. I'm going to tip my hat to Wheels and Terry on the now famous call they had in Canada's 2-0 win over the United States. I mean, anybody who didn't enjoy listening to Terry's real excitement during that match and telling players what to do and yelling at them to shoot, it was really entertaining and real, and you felt like he wanted to win more than the players at times, right? Yeah. So I think that's one way to go about it, and that's what Oliver's getting at. I also think there are other ways to do this. I mean, I kind of like the idea of maybe for less important games, just having more of a really casual on the couch style discussion during the game, where you're referencing the game, you're referencing stories about the players in the game. I think the NBA has done similar stuff to this. So I think there are different ways you can broadcast games, and we kind of get stuck on this whole, well, we need play-by-play and a color for every single game, and they got to sit courtside. I don't think that's the case.
No, Kurt, I'm with you. I think there's a huge opportunity to basically do what would be like a simultaneous podcast while a game is going on. And it doesn't have to be that like the primary broadcast. TSN has 5 channels. Instead of putting, the Raptors game on TSN 1 through 5, make TSN 5 an alternate broadcast where you basically have like a host and 2 pundits, and you have a whole rundown with a bunch of topics. Imagine, like Bill Simmons and Chuck Holsterman and someone else just doing a podcast that happens simultaneously to this game, so they're getting talking points from it.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting experiment.
Well, we get a glimpse of that when there's a post-game or halftime show while games are going on in certain sports, right? So you'll have the panel watching the game, reacting, and then often discussing it, so that we get a glimpse of that. And I agree. I think it's entertaining and it works. We're going to start doing that on our One Soccer broadcast, Kurt?
Well, yeah, I mean, but the issue to me is it's not casual, right? It's very it's very traditional.
Yeah.
Part of the problem could be, the lack of players willing to transition into that kind of setting, and the lack of players who are able to transition into that kind of setting. I mean, why do we like the guys at TNT when they do their NBA broadcasts? It's because they're former players, so their insight is fantastic, but they also have the camaraderie and the showmanship to come on and actually produce something that's entertaining. So
cojones.
So we need to find those people in the CPL. So if you're a retired CPL player, look me up.
Our final discussion point. We heard yesterday that Peyton Manning and Tom Brady will be joining Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson for a little 2v2 golf tournament for charity. What other creative types of social distancing sports would you like to see, Kyle?
Well, first of all, I will definitely be tuning into that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not even much of a golfer, but I love golf. I no longer have a cable package, and the one thing I miss more than anything else is I won't like purchase a live stream of a golf event unless it's the Masters, and I miss those Sundays of just like tuning in, like falling in and out of sleep on my couch following a Sunday. But I'll be watching that for sure. But another thing that on the same line, I've always found captivating are basically the barroom style sports. I love watching billiards. I love bowling, and I love watching darts. I think darts, for whatever reason, I don't understand why it's so fascinating or why it's so appealing, but I love it when it's on. And I have a friend who plays online darts. Now, what I mean by that, it's not virtual. He has a dartboard in his basement, and he has 2 cameras set up. One of them on the dartboard, one of them over the shoulder showing him throw darts, and he logs on and he plays against other people in a league in competition. And it's brilliant. And I would watch that. If you had the professional level dart with that setup, I would be tuning in to watch professional darts go from 501 down to 0, double out, baby. I can't
wait. They actually just did that in England. They just had a stay-at-home darts tournament with a lot of the top professional players.
How did I miss it?
Me too. How did I miss it? It sounds fantastic.
I don't think it went too well. I think there was quite a lot of technical challenges, and including one of the best players in the world who could not participate because his Wi-Fi was not up to the standard required.
Look, we know no one cares. We know no one cares about this stay-at-home stuff. The NBA, or what was it? The NBA's horse event that completely tanked in the ratings. That story's been told by now. I'll give you a sport just because I'm everybody else is giving a sport. I like fishing, so if there's more fishing on TV, I'd probably watch some fishing. I'm a big angler, if you guys didn't know about that. However, I've also written something down here that nobody, for me, the reason we watch sports is because the stakes are high. If there's no stakes, then I don't care. Like I don't watch Major League Baseball training camp because it doesn't matter. I watch real Major League Baseball. I watch the playoffs because the stakes are high enough for me to tune in. So what I would say is if the stakes were high for Kyle Hall's darts tournament, I would probably watch that. If somebody was playing for $1 million or something, I'd tune in. But it matters what the stakes are.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah.
Agree.
You need to have a couple $1 million on the line. You're in?
I'm in. I mean, that's why you watch sports, because the chance to win something. We don't watch it because there are players, shooting baskets in their driveway.
Go WWE style. Loser leaves town match. You lose your darts tournament. You have to self-exile from professional darts for 6 months.
Yeah, that being said, there's lots of great content to watch on OneSoccer YouTube stream tonight. Gareth Wheeler's going inside the game with Marco Santos. After that, it's a CPL Classic, Valor versus York Knights. You definitely want to check that out. as well. That's all the time we have for our Hangouts. For Kurt Larson, Oliver Platt, and a special thank you to Kyle Hall. You definitely want to give him a follow on Twitter.
No, you don't.
Yeah,
No, you do
Kyle
not.
Hall, because
Literally the
we think
worst
that you're-
social media follow on the internet.
Yeah, but then you get that like late at night, and you're reminded.
Support you though.
Yes,
I will
thank
support
you.
you.
I
If you follow
appreciate
me, I'll
that so
support
much,
you.
Kyle. So yeah, we want to thank you, Kyle, and thank our other producer, Lucas Sheffield, who's probably going to appear next week on the Hangout. We'll find out. We'll get him on. Thank you for watching. Until next time. See ya.